Welcome to Chapter 2 of the CPH, Ethical Decision Making. Chapter 2 of the CPH explores the nature of values, ethics, and the law using case scenarios to illustrate ethical concepts and provide practical guidance on ethical decision making. Because the securities industry depends on public trust and confidence, ethics serve as the foundation for industry rules and helps evaluate potential misconduct. A strong ethics framework supports a positive corporate culture by reinforcing shared values and guiding professional behavior. Let's start with key terms for this chapter. And values are the values that help define our personal goals, which may be years away. These include accomplishment, security, and social recognition. An ethical dilemma is the need to make an ethical decision in the face of two or more choices. Ethical relativism is the philosophical position that states there is no such thing as a universal moral principle to govern our behavior. Everything is relative, situational, negotiable, and personal. Each new situation requires us to redefine our values and actions, with each of us having an equal say on what is right or wrong. The front page test and the legal test both have the same definition in the glossary of this textbook. So they are defined as a test to determine whether you are dealing with a right versus wrong issue. Means values are the actions we take today to achieve our goals. Means values include ambition, openness, or competence. The MOM test is a test to determine whether you are dealing with a right versus wrong issue. Morals are the rules and habits of conduct of a society established according to perceived standards of right and wrong. A unified value system is a value system in which end values and means values mutually reinforce and support each other. Values are the individual or cultural measures of the worth we place certain ideas and behavior. They are generally of two types, end and means values. Learning Objective 1. Define ethics and explain the difference between ethics and rules. What are ethics? Ethics are a set of values and standards that guide individual behavior and decision making. Ethics are grounded in right versus wrong, not personal convenience. A person's values may evolve over time, but changes are driven by moral standards. Common ethical values include accountability, fairness, honesty, loyalty, reliability, and trustworthiness. The key idea here is ethics guide how decisions are made, not just what decisions are made. 3 ways to define ethics. Ethics can be understood in 3 complementary ways: professional standards, which are rules or standards governing the behavior of a group or profession; moral principles or values, so the core beliefs about right and wrong; and ethics as a discipline, so the study of moral choices and behavior. Ethics versus morals. Morals are society's standards of right and wrong. They're based on reason, not authority, and cannot be changed by regulators or governments, whereas ethics are the application of moral principles to decisions and behavior. They're used to evaluate actions in real situations. The important distinction here is morals inform ethics, and ethics inform professional conduct. Ethics as a continuous process. In this course, ethics are treated as an ongoing process, not a one time judgment, a way to evaluate behavior and decisions, and grounded in moral principles rather than rigid rules. Ethics require thinking and discernment, not just rule following. Ethics versus rules, the core difference. Rules set minimum standards of behavior. They must be followed regardless of personal belief. They cannot cover every situation, and following rules is not the same as acting ethically. Ethics are based on they're based on internal moral judgment. They apply even when rules are unclear or conflicting, and address the spirit of the law, not just the letter. It's important to note that it's possible to be compliant but unethical at the same time. Why rules alone are not enough. Rules are reactive. They cannot anticipate every scenario. Ethics guide behavior in gray areas. They help resolve conflicting rules. They can be applied universally across situations. So ethics fill the gaps where regulation ends. Ethics in the securities industry. Ethical behavior in the securities industry is grounded in ethics theory, moral principles, regulatory rules, and accepted industry practices. And the regulatory environment includes provincial securities regulators, self regulatory organizations, SROs, the federal government in some cases. So, rules establish the baseline and ethics elevate the standard. Ethical expectations of registered representatives. As an RR, ethical conduct means exercising independent professional judgment and acting with integrity, honesty, fairness, and trustworthiness, conducting business professionally, maintaining and improving professional knowledge, complying with securities legislation and SRO rules, and protecting client confidentiality at all times. The takeaways from learning objective 1 are ethics guide behavior based on values and moral principles. Rules set minimum standards, and ethics go beyond them. Ethical behavior applies even when rules are unclear. In the securities industry, ethics underpin trust, professionalism, and regulation. If you remember one thing, is that rules tell you what you must do, ethics guide what you should do. Learning objective 2, the relationship between values, ethics, and the law. Why does this relationship matter? To build ethical professional or corporate standards, you must understand how values, ethics, and laws all interact and influence behavior. So it's important to note here that ethics do not exist in isolation. They are shaped by values and supported, but not replaced by the law. What are values? Values are the beliefs and priorities that shape how we evaluate ideas, people, and behavior. They influence life goals, decision making, how we treat others. They reflect what we prioritize. So, whether that's money versus people, work versus leisure, self interest versus collective interest. It's important to note here that core values may shift over time, but they rarely change drastically. What are ethics? Ethics are the moral principles that govern behavior built on personal values. They're built on personal values, and societal ethics reflect cultural values. They guide how decisions are made, how we treat others, and how we handle responsibility and trust. What are laws? Laws are not the same as ethics. Laws grow out of society's ethical values, and laws define legally acceptable behavior. The purpose of laws are to set boundaries for behavior, allocate responsibility and risk, and promote predictability and order in society. The key distinction here is what's legal is not always what's ethical. How values, ethics, and law connect. The hierarchy of influence is the following. Number 1, values. What matters to individuals in society. Number 2, ethics. How values are applied to behavior. And number 3, laws. The minimum standards enforced by the state. Ethics versus law in practice. Laws deal with serious enough Laws deal with conduct serious enough to warrant legal consequences. They require evidence and proof, and they define behavior in black and white terms, whereas ethics govern everyday interactions, focus on fairness, responsibility, and social benefit, and address gray areas the law cannot. Key insight here is that ethics guide behavior where laws are silent, outdated, or unclear. Why legal compliance is not always enough. So, ethical behavior is not synonymous with legal compliance because laws may be outdated, incomplete, or poorly enforced. And behavior can be legal, profitable, and unethical in some cases. The textbook provides a real world example of corporate scandals and Ron. So, a number of laws have been created around accounting procedures, corporate governance, and accountability. Previous laws were either not adequate to deal with fraud on this scale or were simply not taken seriously. For example, before Enron's collapse, many accountants and auditing firms regularly circumnavigated laws and rules pertaining to transparent accounting procedures because they fully believed they could not be caught. In other words, the law held little importance for those professionals who were not inclined to behave within ethical boundaries. You cannot legislate ethics. An ethical organization identifies its core values, builds an ethical culture around those values, and ensures compliance at a minimum, but aims higher. Legal versus ethical dilemmas. Legal behavior may still be unethical. For example, minority shareholders may legally control a company, and majority investors bear financial risk without influence. The issue here is the legal structure is not the same as ethical fairness. This can create conflicts of interest and erode trust. The key takeaways from learning Objective 2 are values shape what individuals and societies care about. Ethics apply those values to behavior. Laws enforce minimum standards of conduct. Ethical behavior often goes beyond legal compliance. Strong ethical frameworks protect trust, fairness, and long term outcomes. Learning Objective 3 Value Awareness. Why values matter in the securities industry. The core professional values are integrity, trust, honesty, competency. Self regulation is justified by these values. And the lack of any core value compromises the individual reputation of the RR and the industry reputation. What are values? Values are beliefs, not facts. They guide goals, decisions, and behavior. And the characteristics of values are long lasting but adaptable. They influence personal and corporate actions. Some examples are accountability, fairness, loyalty, and reliability. Values clarification. Values equal understanding your personal value system. It's important to note that values guide ethical decision making. They help navigate difficult or unfamiliar situations, and they reduce risk of actions that harm your reputation or firm. So to be clarified on your values is understanding your personal value system. It's like having a compass, a north star. Types of values. End values define personal or professional goals. Examples: accomplishment, social recognition, security. Means values guide actions to achieve goals. So examples are ambition, competence, openness. The principle here is end and means values should align. Values in organizations. Explicit values communicate what the company stands for. So values are reflected in mission statements, internal policies, and daily behavior expectations. Tone at the top is referenced in the book. Leaders must model and filter values to the organization. The values of a company trickle down from the top to the bottom. Benefits of organizational values. They set a common direction for employees, provide a framework for ethical decision making, guide behavior in daily operations, and provide stability and continuity in changing environments. Values for individuals. Core personal values shape decision making, problem solving, relationships and social interactions, ethical behavior, and perception of success. Awareness is the moral courage to act ethically under pressure. Values and society. Societal values influence individual behavior. Ethical relativism is when values are situational and individual. The risk here is a me first mentality in the securities industry, which can lead to unethical behavior, even if legal. So, this is in the case of ethical relativism being applied. Universal moral principles exist and guide ethical conduct, which is truth, fairness, love, responsibility, and respect for life. Motives versus behavior. Ethical behavior matters more than motives. Employees may act ethically for self interest, respect for authority, or concern for society. The outcome here is that client and firms they benefit ethically regardless of the motive. Okay, so here we have a case study from the textbook. Garrett. Garrett is a portfolio manager at York Investments, an advisory firm specializing in managing assets for high net worth clients. Garrett often directs a large number of his trades to Block Inc., a small securities dealer run by Mark, his old school classmate. Block is not very competitive in order execution pricing compared with other large dealers. However, the company does supply free research as part of its arrangements with its clients. Three of York's equity analysts have questioned the usefulness of Block's research, demanding to know why Garrett continues to use Block for order execution. The truth is that in return for Garrett's business, Mark recommends Garrett's advisory services to Block's wealthiest clients. Garrett has not disclosed this arrangement to York or to the clients Mark refers to him. As part of his working relationship with Garrett, Mark charges all of his clients a slightly higher fee for access to research. About 80% of Block's clients make use of this research. The remaining 20% do not use it but still pay the higher fee as part of Block's overall fee structure to his clients. Garrett wonders if it is right to charge the fee to those Block clients who do not use his research. Mark, for his part, sees no problem with the arrangement. So the analysis here for this case study is industry and professional codes of ethics do not permit the withholding of information about personal interests that are materially relevant to client services or recommendations. Garrett is also faced with the issue whether his and Mark's interests are conflicting with the interests of the clients who are paying a research fee, but who are not using the research. Conflicts of interest will be discussed in greater detail further on in this course. Okay, so what's going on in the case study? Garrett directs trades to Block Inc., benefiting personally. The issues here are conflict of interest and non-disclosure of material personal interests. The lesson here is that RRs and investment professionals must identify, manage, and disclose the conflicts of interest. Key principle: clients' interests come first. Learning objective 4. Explain what happens when values conflict. What is an ethical dilemma? An ethical dilemma occurs when two or more ethical choices conflict. Not all ethical decisions involve dilemmas. A dilemma exists only when core values are present on both sides. Two types of ethical decisions. All ethical decisions fall into one category: right versus wrong, or right versus right, which are true ethical dilemmas. Right versus wrong issues. The characteristics are: one option is illegal, one option is untrue or deceptive, one option causes significantly more harm than good, one option violates society's shared moral values. There is only one ethical choice. So the textbook provides another case study, Murray. We'll go over this first. Murray has been an RR with Catskills Investments for over 25 years, during which time he created a large book of clients. Recently, Catskills was taken over by Wealthmaker Securities, WMS, a firm that specializes in serving high net worth clients. To meet each client's needs effectively, WMS has implemented policy that prohibits RRs from servicing more than 100 accounts. As with any securities dealer, WMS has expected productivity levels that must be maintained by all RRs. Any RRs who are unable to meet their targets over a given time will be asked to leave the firm. Murray, who wants to stay with the firm despite the account restriction, finds himself facing a dilemma. A number of his elderly clients have been with him since he started in the business and they rely on him. They are not large revenue producers, but they are loyal clients who would be lost if they were forced to find a new advisor. It is unlikely they could find someone to take care of their accounts the way Murray has. On the other hand, Murray knows that he will have to keep only his top 90 clients if he is to meet WMS's high productivity requirement. Another concern Murray has is that a few of his major clients have opened up small accounts to allow their teenage children to dabble in the market. Murray is afraid that if he closes out these accounts, the parents would be offended and would close out their accounts as well. Besides, even though the children's accounts may be relatively small now, these young people are the future heirs to their parents' assets. Murray knows that maintaining a relationship with them could be lucrative in the future. Murray has also a handful of accounts that belong to day traders. Their accounts are relatively small, but when the market is active, these clients enter several trades a day, which generates a fair amount of commission. However, when the markets are quiet or down, the accounts are relatively dormant. Ethically, what should Murray do? The analysis for this case study. In this situation, Murray is faced with a complex ethical dilemma. His top 90 accounts are necessary to meet his productivity targets, which means he has only 10 account spaces available for other clients. Several questions arise. Does he have an equal obligation to all of his clients? Which clients should he keep? His elderly clients who really need professional advice, the children of his wealthy clients whose accounts may someday become lucrative and whose parents he does not wish to offend, the day traders whose accounts could bring in a significant amount of money in an extended bull market. Murray has a number of possible courses of action, and each choice has some right elements, and no choice is thoroughly wrong. How is he to decide on the right course of action? So, Murray's first steps in resolving the dilemma is to identify which of the following values are in conflict. Okay, so we have professionalism. Is he conducting his client's business in a professional manner? What is the best way to let clients go when he can no longer work with them? Financial well being. How can he generate sufficient revenue to meet his firm's imposed revenue goals from a reduced client base? Fiduciary responsibility. Does he have a fiduciary duty to put all of his clients' interests in the situation above his own? Integrity. Are his actions in keeping with how he sees himself as a person and as a professional? Okay. So, the dilemma here is that the firm restricts RRs to 100 accounts, and Murray first must keep the top 90 clients to meet targets. There's conflicting client groups that were discussed: the elderly long term clients, the teenage heirs of wealthy clients, and active day traders. What is the ethical course of action? Well, we'll start off with the values in conflict. Murray must weigh competing values: professionalism, handling clients responsibly, financial well being, meeting the firm's expectations, fiduciary duty, prioritizing the client's interests, and integrity, acting consistently with personal ethics. Why Murray's case is right versus right. Conflicting ethical claims include loyalty to elderly clients versus employers' business needs, long term client relationships versus short term revenue, and personal job security versus client well being. So no option is entirely wrong. His values are just colliding. Why Murray's case is right versus right. Four common types of ethical dilemmas. Most dilemmas fall into one of these categories: truth versus loyalty, individual versus group, short term versus long term, and justice versus mercy. So, truth versus loyalty is when honesty versus commitment to the firm. Individual versus group is fairness to few versus many. Short term versus long term is immediate gain versus future well being. Justice versus mercy is fair punishment versus compassion. And this is explained in detail in these screenshots from the textbook. To expand on truth versus loyalty, in a truth versus loyalty dilemma, the values of honesty or integrity clash with the values of commitment, personal responsibility, or promise keeping. For example, suppose you recommend an in house investment product to a client and the client asks if it is the best fit of its kind in the market. Strictly based on return on investment, the product is fairly competitive with most similar products. However, some products on the market are currently earning a better return. Truth demands that you tell your client that higher performing products exist, which does not mean they will continue to perform well over time. However, loyalty to your firm demands you support the in house product. Individual versus group. In an individual versus group dilemma, the rights and values of the few clash with the rights and values of the many. This dilemma type can be seen in terms of us versus them, self versus others, or the smaller group versus the larger group. For example, suppose you've been allocated 10,000 shares of a new issue that appears to be an excellent investment. To whom among your clients do you offer these shares? Is it fair to offer them to your best customers only who represent the smaller group, or should you select lottery style from among all your clients who represent the larger group? Short term versus long term. In a short term versus long term dilemma, a conflict arises when immediate needs or desires run counter to future goals or prospects. In other words, means values clash with ends values. For example, suppose a client wants to invest in a security, but you have doubts about its suitability for that client. However, the client insists that you purchase it for him. Do you go ahead with the transaction or do you refuse because it does not suit the client's long term goals? So, the last one is justice versus mercy. In a justice versus mercy dilemma, the values of fairness, equity, and righteousness conflict with the values of compassion, empathy, and love. For example, suppose you're supervising an employee who has been working overtime during a very busy period. She was supposed to take a seminar that could fulfill her continuing education requirements but did not have time. She decided to take the web based course instead. To speed things up, she asked a colleague who had previously taken the course to give her the answers to the accompanying quiz. When you find out from another colleague what happened, you have to make a decision. Do you do you mete out justice by publicly disciplining the employee for cheating, or do you grant mercy by taking her aside and telling her to take the seminar as soon as she can and to avoid cheating in the future? Key takeaways. Ethical dilemmas arise when values conflict, not when rules are broken. Recognizing right versus right is the first step. Most ethical challenges exist in gray areas, not black and white. Ethical reasoning requires value awareness, not just rule compliance. Okay, learning objective 5. Apply the ethical decision making process. What is ethical decision making? Ethical decision making is a structured, deliberate process. It's used when values conflict and rules alone are insufficient. It helps us identify responsibility, consequences, and ethical outcomes. Here are the 8 steps for the process from the book. You have number 1, recognize that there is a moral issue. Number 2, determine whose moral issue it is. Number 3, gather the facts. Number 4, test for right versus wrong issues. Number 5, test for right versus right paradigms. Number 6, apply the resolution principles. Number 7, make the decision. And number 8, reflect on the process. So step 1 is recognize a moral issue. Ask, is there an ethical concern beyond business or compliance? Are values such as integrity, duty of care, or fairness involved? So, in Murray's case, you must decide how to act ethically towards clients he may no longer serve. Step 2, determine whose moral issue it is. Identify who must decide and who is accountable. Ethical responsibility cannot be delegated. Murray must alone decide. He must accept responsibility for the outcome. Step 3, gather the facts. Key questions to ask: who is affected? What duties do I owe? Are there alternatives that reduce harm? Murray has to consider duty to elderly clients, the firm's productivity requirements, and possible transition solutions. Steps 4 and 5, test the type of issue. Step 4, right versus wrong. So is it illegal? Is it dishonest? Is it clearly unethical? If it's not, then all options are legal and ethical. So we move on to step 5. Okay, is it a right versus right issue? If it is, then the conflicting ethical values present. So yes to professionalism, loyalty, fiduciary duty, and integrity. So test for right versus wrong issues. Okay, so we have the legal test. In Murray's case, it is it illegal or against industry rules for him to inform certain clients he can no longer service them? Is WMS's policy of allowing him to handle only 100 counts illegal? No, neither practice is legal. In fact, it is standard industry practices for RRs to inform clients with whom they will no longer work with that their relationship is ending. The front page test. The front page test deals with reputation. Would Murray's reputation suffer if his behavior in the situation became public knowledge? He should imagine how his actions would be perceived if a major newspaper were to publish an article about the situation. Would his reputation be harmed if the general public learned that he let certain clients go to meet his new employer's investment mandate? Assuming that Murray will inform his clients in a professional and honest manner, it does not seem that his reputation would suffer if his actions became public knowledge. In fact, the publicity could attract wealthy investors to the firm where they learn that WMS requires its RRs to dedicate all their energy to their type of client. The mom test. Murray must consider how comfortable he would feel revealing his decision to the people whose opinions really matter to him. For example, if he chooses to let his elderly clients go and keep only his wealthy clients, what would his mother say? If he would be ashamed to tell her, then it probably is not the right decision. If, on the other hand, he would be comfortable telling her, then it passes the test. In this case, it seems that Murray has no choice but to drop some of his clients. Though he may feel badly about it, he has no reason to be ashamed. He can honestly tell anyone who wants to know why it was necessary and why he chose one set of clients over another. So, test for right versus right paradigms. At this stage, you should be asking if the following questions determine which core values are in conflict. Is there a truth versus loyalty dilemma? Murray's dilemma has some elements of this paradigm. For example, should he tell his elderly clients the truth that they do not fit the investment mandate imposed on them? Or should he be loyal to them and keep them on his book? He does not have the issue to the same degree with the day traders because they do not rely as heavily on his help. They usually contact him only when the markets are performing well, so he does not have the type of personal relationship that requires loyalty. Is this an individual versus group dilemma? Murray's dilemma has a significant aspect of this paradigm in the form of a small group versus large group conflict. Out of the various groups of clients, the elderly, the wealthy clients, children, and the day traders, he must determine which groups should take priority. Does he owe the same rights of duty to his less profitable clients as he does to his wealthy clients? Is this a short term versus long term dilemma? Murray's dilemma has strong elements of this paradigm. From a professional and personal point of view, the sensible short term choice is to concentrate on his wealthy clients. They are the focus of his firm's new mandate and the source of his compensation. However, he must also consider whether this choice will have long term repercussions. Will his wealthy clients leave if he drops their children's accounts? What about the harm to his long term relationships with those children who may as well be his future top clients? Is this a justice versus mercy dilemma? This paradigm could come into play with Murray's vulnerable elderly clients. A just choice would be for Murray to tell these clients that his firm has a new investment strategy that is legal and fair. Unfortunately, he must let them go because they do not fit the new criteria. A merciful choice would be to keep these clients because they have been with him for so long and they would be lost without him. Another merciful choice would be to make sure that they are all well looked after if he does let them go. Step 6, apply the resolution principles. So there are 4 ethical lenses to test decisions. Number 1, end-based thinking, the greatest good for the greatest number. Number 2, Rule-based thinking, what rule should everyone follow? Number three, sorry, so what rule should everyone follow, which means social contract-based thinking. And then what supports group harmony and trust? And then last is personalistic-based thinking, what aligns with my authentic self? Okay, so applying the resolution principles. Here's a screenshot from the book. Step 7, make the decision. So, in Murray's case, after applying all principles, Murray decides to keep the wealthiest clients to meet the firm's goals, retain the children of the wealthy clients for long term growth, allocate remaining spots to the most active traders, personally transition elderly clients to trusted RRs, and provide support during the transition. The outcomes of the decision. So, because he took those actions, in Murray's decisions, he ends up supporting the client's duty of care, aligns with firm's business strategy, he preserves their professional integrity, and enables future asset growth. Step 8 is reflect on the process. Reflection happens over time, not instantly. You have to constantly be asking, were clients treated fairly and respectfully? Were there better alternatives? How can future decisions improve? So the key takeaway here is ethical decision making is a repeatable skill, not a one time event. This is an image of the ethical decision making process from the textbook.